Sessions offered that amendment up in the Rules Committee, but he did say that he was concerned about the fact that it's not paid for. I just listened to the remarks, that it was not paid for. And, Madam Speaker, I think it's really important for us to look at this issue of paid for. Now, I've stood in this well for a long period of time, frankly, since I first got here, and talked about, because I came here with Ronald Reagan, to talk about the bipartisan approach that needs to be taken towards getting our economy back on track. Steve Forbes, in his great new book entitled How Capitalism Will Save Us, refers to real-world economics. We have to look at reality here. Now, it is a pipe dream for people to believe that somehow, if you reduce the top rate on capital gains, that it's going to be a huge burden to the federal government, when every shred of evidence that we have is that not only will that kind of tax incentive be paid for, it will dramatically increase the revenues to the federal government. And the best example, I don't think I need to appeal to our side of the aisle by pointing to Ronald Reagan, but as I look to the other side of the aisle, I would appeal by making the argument that this is exactly what President John F. Kennedy, one of our nation's greatest presidents, a Democrat, did in 1961. Now, Madam Speaker, what he did was he brought about broad, across-the-board marginal tax rate reduction, including a large reduction of the capital gains tax rate. Now, my friend says this needs to be paid for. Madam Speaker, not only was the Kennedy capital gains rate reduction paid for, it led to a doubling of the flow of revenues to the federal treasury. Similarly, and that's why I like to talk about this as a bipartisan proposal, in 1981, Ronald Reagan did the exact same thing. We saw across-the-board marginal rate reduction, and at the same time we saw a reduction of the capital gains rate. And what happened, Madam Speaker? Not only did that marginal rate reduction and capital gains reduction pay for itself, it actually doubled the flow of revenues to the federal treasury during the decade of the 1980s. Now, we know that there are those who say that the tax reductions that we saw in the early part of this decade, the decade that we've just gone through, are responsible for the increase in deficits that we had, completely forgetting the fact that we have had to see huge increases in spending on national defense, on veterans benefits, on homeland security, things that came about because of the tragedy of September 11th of 2001. We also have seen other increases in spending, but, Madam Speaker, we could have done better when the Republicans were in the majority. I am the first to admit that. But if you look at the fact, again, as I said just a few moments ago, that the $2 trillion increase in the national debt that's taken place over the last 14 months is larger than the entire increase in the debt that took place during the 8 years of the Bush presidency. And so that's why I think that what we need to do is take this bipartisan approach. And since my friend from California, the manager of this rule here on the House floor, has argued that we should bring about capital gains reduction, but he says he wants it to be paid for, we need to look at the fact that that kind of reduction not only pays for itself, but will help us deal with the tremendous debt burden that we face today. And again, the cost of that increased debt burden is hurting the United States of America in this country and in international markets around the world. That's what we need to do, not looking at a hodgepodge of ideas, trying to pick out what incentive here for one part of the economy or another. We need to let real-world economics actually be applied here, and unfortunately we haven't been, and this bill does not do that at all. So I thank my friend for yielding and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California.